Hello everyone and welcome to The Green Man. Hope you're all doing good and well. So time for an album review this Monday. This time I'm reviewing the 7th studio album from Steven Wilson, and this is his release, The Harmony Codex, which came out on Friday the 29th of September via Virgin Records, and the album is 10 tracks and an hour and 4 minutes in length. So for those of you that were displeased with his adventure into synth pop territory with his last album, The Future Bites, he is very much, I think, more going back towards a prog rock sound on this album, while still retaining some of those electronic elements he's used in his more recent releases, I would say, like To The Bone and like The Future Bites. You get here something a bit more expansive, experimental, of the kind I actually think a little bit of his approach to this album reminded me just a touch of Grace for Drowning, but with all the modern things, all the more recent things, I should say, that he's been doing in later albums with the electronic aspects in his sound. Of course, he brings into his music a lot of those 70s prog rock instruments, or instruments that make you think of 70s prog rock, maybe I should say, like Hammond organs, mellotrons, synthesizers of all sorts. And that gives this album, quite sort of and Steven Wilson. I think it kind of gives him makes you recognise who is doing this music. It's kind of Steven Wilson. That, a lot of those 70s prog rock bands that use those instruments did so without the benefits of the production and, all the stuff that Steven Wilson now has at his disposal currently, which I dare say, wasn't available in the 1970s. And so, I think this album is a bit of a return to form, for me. I do think I'll come to some criticisms when I'm talking a bit more about the tracks, but I do think on the whole, if you're a Steven Wilson fan, and particularly a fan of his proggier leaning records, then you will enjoy the Harmony Codex quite a bit. I think there's a lot here to really quite enjoy. Now, of course, coming back into the fray here, we've got Nina Tayeb, and I'm very pleased to say that on the track where she certainly features a lot, that is certainly a standout song on this album. We also see Theo Travis making a return, and other session musicians. Actually, also Guy Pratt performs bass on the second track on this album, I believe, as well. So you've got lots of the people that Steven likes to work with coming into the mix here and delivering, helping him presumably to deliver this album. Now, I'm only talking about the standard album release here, not the deluxe three-disc edition or box set that's also been released. This is just the standard release I'm talking about here, and the 10 tracks on that. Speaking of the tracks, let's talk about the tracks a bit more now. I liked Inclination a lot, actually. At first I wasn't sure about that song because it kind of has this looping, sort of strange percussion-like sound over and over again, but then the more I listened to it, I realised, that there are some actually pretty cool developments when you really listen into this track. And so it's kind of growing on me, this opening song of this album, Inclination. What Life Brings reminds me a bit of a song from Lightbulb Sun, one of my favourite Porcupine Tree albums for sure. And therefore I quite enjoyed that. I like the soft acoustic melody and Steven Wilson's vocal stylings as ever. Steven Wilson, I think, is kind of underrated as a vocalist. I do think he's got quite a unique voice, and I think he can sing really well. And I think that track actually demonstrates that, as well as the next track I wanted to talk about, one of the lead singles to the album, Economies of Scale. This was a really quite stunning track, the way it builds up. And again, he's the master of developing songs, Steven Wilson, I think, in a lot of cases. And this track demonstrates that with the way he layers the vocals and sings economies of scales, economy. I really enjoyed that a lot. Rock Bottom for me is the sort of the knockout track, if you like, on the album. I mean, a lot of that has to do with Nina Tayeb. I think she's a phenomenal vocalist on this and performs outstandingly well, as you kind of expect when she's on a Steven Wilson album. You get these stunning tracks, and it took me back a bit to the sort of song you might get on Hand Cannot Erase or a record like that. I mean, Hand Cannot Erase, let's be honest, that's an absolutely fantastic record, certainly in my opinion. Now, as the album got towards the end, with tracks like Time Is Running Out, Actual Brutal Facts, and Staircase, you had a lot of these spoken words, elements to them, which I thought were okay, but there was a lot of that, and to have that all stacked at the end of the album, I also didn't feel that these tracks developed as well as a lot of the other tracks on the album. These last kind of 3 tracks, I thought sort of just, made me slip out of the album a bit and distracted me a little bit from what I'd really enjoyed up until that point. So for 2/3 of this album, I'm absolutely in for the journey, I think. But when I got towards the end, I just lost a bit of focus with the album. And to be honest, on repeat listens, these tracks still haven't won me over yet. So I'm wondering whether this is maybe my personal, in my personal view, a weaker point on this album. But overall, as I say, I think this is a bit of a return to form for Mr. Wilson here. And, some really great stuff here. You have to be a little bit patient with a couple of songs, I think, for sure. But yes, some still pretty strong stuff. I'm actually giving this album probably a higher score than I would have given Future Bites had I reviewed Future Bites. I'm going to give it a 7.5 out of 10. I think it's really solid, and there are stunning moments, don't get me wrong, but I wouldn't rate it quite as highly as I might Hank Cannot Erase or The Raven That Refused to Sing or even To the Bone. I'm not sure I quite like quite as much as those records, but I still like it quite a bit. And it may yet grow on me a little bit more, I'm sure, as time goes on. So, yeah, hope you enjoyed this album. Let me know what you think of the Harmony Codex in the comments. I'd be interested to know from you. So, until next time, bye for now.